Hey, everybody. Remember, if you're a fan of the Tennessee Volunteers or just sports in general, please like, comment, and subscribe. Any and all support's greatly appreciated. Now, let's get to the video. Hey, guys. How's it going? Josh here. Hope everybody's had a pretty good week. I know here in East Tennessee, we were expecting the winter storm of I would say the century, but like of the last 2 centuries. And now it's predicted to be rain, but now some stuff's starting to change. So maybe we'll get a little snow, maybe some ice. So a lot of stuff up in the air. But the purpose of today's video was we had something pretty exciting drop, and that was the first official interview with Jim Knowles and Mike Keith. Of course, in case you're unaware, Jim Knowles being the new defensive coordinator of the University of Tennessee, of course, coming from Penn State, formerly the national championship winning coach at Ohio State. So again, super excited to have him on board. We've alluded to him in a couple of videos, but I'm unsure about you all. This is my first time ever seeing him in an official capacity, hearing him having a conversation while at the University of Tennessee and not somewhere else. And there were a few different things in the interview that stood out to me today. So this is really going to be an analysis of that video on the Tennessee Athletics YouTube channel. So if you ever want to see that, just jump over to that YouTube channel and you'll be able to get a look into it. But something that was really interesting to me that I literally did not know, especially after the conclusion of the regular season, there was some conversation of us going in a direction with another defensive coordinator. I like to think I'm pretty up to date on Twitter. At no point was I aware that Jim Knowles' daughter attended the University of Tennessee, and that's something that he discusses in this video. He mentioned that throughout the hiring process, she was very vocal about him wanting to coach at the University of Tennessee. He said that she would send him videos. Whether this was true or not, he had said that they had a kind of an unspoken pact that one day he would hope that he would get to coach here. Whether that's true or not, I think just that connection to the university, of course, when you have a child that goes there or someone or you have some type of tie, that always heightens the chance. It heightens kind of that nostalgia factor. And, I'm not going to say that was the big thing that played into it, but I certainly don't think that helped. Or I certainly do think that did help. Another thing that he says throughout the interview process, right, that his conversations with Josh Heupel were super insightful. Now, again, this is a university-led interview, but something that he had mentioned was in all of his years of interviewing, that his interviews with Josh Heupel were some of the best that he had ever had. That Josh Heupel was a very down-to-earth human, but also someone very serious and very knowledgeable and understood the need and the importance of this role. So again, I think many of us as fans, we see Josh Heupel, we don't get a ton of bulletin board material from him in the off season. He's always very level-headed. I personally love that, especially, dear God, compared to Butch Jones a few years ago. But it was really great hearing him kind of walk through that, having those conversations with Coach Heupel, seeing how down to earth he was certainly a factor that impacted him coming here. Another thing that he had brought up was he had the opportunity during our bowl preparation not to game plan, but rather to start meeting personnel, meeting coaches. And he didn't say this, but essentially vetting, who's good, who's not good, which coaches do we want to keep, which ones do we want to get rid of. And he said that he started to lay the foundation to develop some of those relationships. Candidly speaking, he was likely pretty horrified by that defensive experience that we saw against Illinois. So really, there's only the opportunity for us to go up. I thought it was interesting, right? He also called out, Coach Garner, Coach Inge, I think, the linebackers coach who was the defensive coordinator for that game. Those were the two coaches that he retained. Everybody else left, and he brought in his own guys, right? And that led into the next part of the interview where he was talking about, as we enter into this upcoming season, the importance for staff alignment. He speaks about, getting to know those coaches, seeing who would be a good fit on his staff, but also bringing those coaches from previous stops, whether it was at Ohio State or Penn State. Why? Because, again, and we'll get to this in a moment, it is no great secret that Jim Knowles' scheme is not the most easy one to implement, right? So by having coaches who have been in it elsewhere, he is able to bring in a similar way that you would bring in players that are familiar with it to get, ahead of the curve. You're not going to have to wait for coaches to understand the scheme and then start teaching it to the players, but rather you're going to bring in guys who are already familiar, who have already implemented that scheme. They know what to expect. They know where the resistance may be, and they know how to teach it, right? So that could be partially why virtually the entire defensive staff was let go or not retained. I think that's part of it. I also think purely the performance that we saw over the course of the last year. But that's also why we see him, that he went out and retained guys that he had formerly worked with. So, the jury's out. We'll see what it looks, what we're saying a year from now. But one thing is certain, right? This is something that he's aware of, that he needs alignment, and it could make the difference for the team. So, I thought that was really interesting. Something else that he spoke about is that, and I think many of us have seen this clip. If not, I want to say it was in 2024 when we were winning games by just sheer defensive dominance with Jamad McCoy, an aggressive defensive line, an amazing linebacker core. There's that famous clip where Josh Heupel comes out and he says, the standard at Tennessee is not an offensive powerhouse. The standard of Tennessee is having one of, if not the most elite defensive defenses in the entire nation. We are the home of Reggie White, right? And we want to emulate that when we are on the field. And I think we strayed away from that. But again, Coach Knowles talks about how he clipped that 30-second clip, and all throughout the transfer portal period and now actively as he recruits, he says when he has players in his office, he plays them that clip of Josh Heupel, and he says, this is what we want to be, and this is where we want to be, right? So, again, that bond with Josh Heupel, it appears to be a real one if he's using Josh Heupel in his recruiting, recycling and using those clips. And again, we talk about this in implementing the scheme, and he mentions this during the interview process, right? Bringing in those players similar to the coaches who have experience in his system. It's going to help implement it quicker. Something that really stood out to me is, oh my gosh, I want to say his name's Amari Campbell, but I could be wrong. The linebacker from Penn State that transferred in, one of the first things that he posted about was how excited he was to help the other guys on the team learn this system and benefit from it. That type of mentality shift is key. So you can see that Coach Knowles was very intentional and methodical in his pursuit of those former Penn State players, potentially some Ohio State players, to get them into the system because they know what to do and they can help others. Just wrapping up here, right? Some last things. He confirmed that he is going to be running the base 4-2-5 look, as well as some 4-3. So this is pretty standard for him if you're familiar with his scheme at all. But something he said that stood out to me is he's here to play offense while on defense, that he wants his defensive players attacking and being offensive. I think so often, Tim Banks's defense was either all blitz or you're dropping back 15 yards when the opponent only needs 7 or 8 yards to gain a first down. Having that mentality of where they're playing offense on defense is going to be something that I think is going to be pretty significant. And then finally, and this is something, as a Tennessee fan, it's been quite atrocious over the course of Josh Heupel's tenure, not so much for the offense, but the defense, is he prides himself in in-game adjustments. You come in with your game plan. If that game plan's not working, it's all about adjusting on the fly. And he said that his system is something that empowers and enables the players to be able to do so. Something else that he said, right, is they're coaching to put them in that position, right? They're not here to coach you effort. That effort should already be there. They've addressed that in the spring, in the summer, and during camp. If they're having to coach effort during the middle of the game, something's went terribly wrong. And something else, and I'll end with this, is he had mentioned that the last thing he says to players before they leave out of the locker room is that all of the mistakes that are made that day are on him, and all of the big plays are on those players. That mentality of, being able to do your job, that you know what to do, and if you do not know what to do, that's on his shoulders. That's a type of accountability that I don't want to say we've lacked, but we haven't heard it said explicitly over the course of the last 5 years. So I don't know about you. Super excited about this. It's always such a bummer this time of year. Football's winding up. We've got 9 months not 8 months until football starts back up. But man, am I pumped up. Am I pumped up to see what Jim Knowles is going to put out on the field? But let me know what you think in the comments. If you've watched the video, are you excited? Do you have any concerns? Be sure to put it in the comments, and I look forward to hearing what you say. Thanks again for stopping in today. And remember, if you like this content, I can't ask enough. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Any and all support's greatly appreciated. And as always, go Vols!